Have you ever noticed how some people seem to carry an invisible weight on their shoulders, as if they're constantly on high alert, ready to solve any problem, unable to simply relax? There's something peculiar about that, because these people often didn't choose to be this way. They were shaped, forged in circumstances that demanded a maturity from them that they weren't yet old enough to possess. Some studies indicate that children who assumed adult responsibilities too early, or were exposed to abuse or traumatic situations, showed greater fluctuations in their cortisol levels in adulthood than those who had a more protected childhood. Some people suffered from higher than normal cortisol levels, while others suffered from very low levels. But the bad part about all this is that these people don't feel stressed, they feel normal. Because for them, living in a constant state of hypervigilance is the only normal they know. Psychology has a name for that. Actually, it has several: parentification, premature adultification, relational developmental trauma. That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Before we get to the video, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss future content. Also, leave a like on the video to help it reach more people. Now, back to the video. Chapter 1. The Concepts, the Anatomy of a Stolen Childhood. Let's start from the beginning. What exactly does it mean to have to be strong too early? Hungarian psychologist Alice Miller, who dedicated decades to studying childhood trauma, described it this way: a gifted child is one who has been able to capture the unconscious needs of their parents and adapt to them, at the expense of their own needs. Read that again. At the expense of their own needs. This is parentification, and it happens in two main ways. The first is instrumental parentification. It's the 8-year-old child who prepares dinner for younger siblings because the mother works 2 jobs. It's the 14-year-old teenager who manages the household finances because the father can't. It's the 10-year-old girl who takes care of her sick grandmother after school. These are practical tasks, concrete, visible. But there is a second form, much more subtle and devastating: emotional parentification. This is the child who becomes the mother's confidant during the divorce. He is the son who needs to calm his alcoholic father. She is the girl who learns to read the moods of the adults around her to know if she is safe or not. A therapist specializing in family trauma said something I'll never forget. These children develop such a keen emotional radar that they can sense the tension in a room before they even enter it. But this radar comes at a price. They can never turn it off. You might hear this and think, that sounds like a superpower, I wish I had that ability. But this emotional radar comes at a very high price for a child. These children often become the heroes of the family. They are praised for being mature, responsible, and reliable. You are so mature for your age. I don't know what I would do without you. You are different from other children. These compliments, they're poison disguised as affection, because what this child is learning is not that she is special. It's that she only has value when she is being useful, when she is taking care of someone, when she is solving problems that aren't hers. The psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott called this a false self, a persona constructed not from what the child truly is, but from what they need to be in order to survive in the environment they have been given. And this false self is so convincing that even the person themselves believes in it. Until decades later, she finds herself sitting in a therapy room saying, "I don't know who I am when I'm not taking care of someone." Chapter 2. The Signs. How to recognize invisible scars. Now comes the part that probably brought you here. How do you know if this happened to you? Because the tricky thing about developmental trauma is that it doesn't come with visible scars. Often this trauma hides in your automatic reactions, in your relationship patterns, and in how you relate to your own needs. So let's look at the signs. First sign, you have a dysfunctional relationship with rest. I'm not just talking about working too much. I'm talking about a genuine inability to relax without feeling guilty. As if you always need to be producing, always be useful, always be on the go. Someone described it perfectly. When I finally sit down to watch something or read a book, my mind is kind of waiting for the other ball to fall. As if relaxing were a luxury I don't deserve, or worse, as if it were irresponsible. That's hypervigilance. And it doesn't switch off just because you've grown up and left that house. Second sign, you are incredibly competent in crises, but you crumble in calmer times. Does this sound familiar? You're the person everyone turns to when things go wrong. You're calm under pressure. You solve problems with impressive clarity, but when life is going well, you don't know what to do with it. Because you were trained for emergencies. Your nervous system was programmed to operate in survival mode. When there is no crisis, you unconsciously create one, or you simply feel empty. A researcher who studies complex trauma explains this in neurological terms. The brains of these people have developed a stress architecture. The amygdala is constantly active, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for emotional regulation, works in overdrive. They have become experts at managing threats but have never learned how to process safety. Read that last line again. They never learned how to process security. Third sign, you have profound difficulty asking for help. It's not pride. It's not healthy independence. It's a deeply ingrained belief that you are only loved when you are being strong. That vulnerability is weakness. That needing someone is an unacceptable burden. You can probably name several times you've helped other people. But do you remember the last time you genuinely asked for help and allowed yourself to truly receive it? That's tough, isn't it? Fourth sign, your relationships follow an exhausting pattern. You attract people who need saving, or you automatically put yourself in the role of savior, or you choose emotionally unavailable partners because deep down, that's familiar to you. Relational therapist Esther Perel observes something interesting. People who were parentified in childhood often reproduce the caregiver-dependent dynamic in their adult relationships, not because they want to, but because it's the only type of intimacy they know. And what happens when someone tries to take care of you in return? You feel uncomfortable, even suffocated, because receiving care was never part of the script. Fifth sign, you feel disproportionate guilt for things that are not your responsibility. If someone around you is upset, you automatically assume it's your job to fix it. If a project goes wrong, even if it's not your area of expertise, you feel you should have foreseen it. If someone close to you is suffering, you feel you've failed. This is the hallmark of emotional parentification. You've internalized the idea that you're responsible for the emotional well-being of everyone around you. A therapist with 25 years of experience in trauma said, "These people carry an existential guilt, as if the simple act of existing were a burden to others, and they spend their whole lives trying to compensate for taking up space." Sixth sign, you have a complicated relationship with your own emotions, suppressed anger, delayed sadness, denied fear. Because when you were a child, you weren't allowed to feel. You had to be strong, stable, the kind that holds everything together. So you developed an almost superhuman ability to compartmentalize, to put your emotions in a box and sit on top of it. Until one day, usually in your 30s or 40s, that box explodes, and you don't understand why it's falling apart over something seemingly small. It's not a small amount, it's accumulated. Decades of unprocessed emotions are finally demanding your attention. Do you know what's interesting about all this? Often, people who develop these negative characteristics become very successful in many areas of life because they are trustworthy, competent, resilient. But there is a difference between chosen force and imposed force, and that difference determines whether you live your life or merely survive it. Chapter 3. The consequences in adulthood. The cost of premature force. There is a cruel irony in the story of those who had to be strong too early. These people often become highly functional, successful, admired. From the outside, they seem to have everything under control. But what about the inside? That's a completely different story. Let's talk about the real consequences of this. First consequence, existential burnout. It's not just work fatigue. It's a weariness of existing. Some psychologists describe this as being fatigue, when life itself becomes an exhausting performance of competence and control. Because living in constant hypervigilance consumes an absurd amount of energy. Your nervous system is always in emergency mode. Your body never truly rests. Unlike professional burnout, which can be resolved with vacation or a job change, Existential burnout has no simple solution, because its source is not external. It's the way you were programmed to exist in the world. One person described it this way: "I feel like a computer that's been on for too long. Everything works, but it's overheating, and I don't know how to turn it off." Second consequence: profound loneliness even when surrounded by people. Here's the paradox: you probably have a lot of people around you. You're that reliable friend, the responsible partner, the colleague everyone seeks out, but you feel profoundly alone. Because true intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires letting someone see you when you're not being strong, when you're not solving problems, when you're not being helpful, and that's terrifying. A couples therapist with 30 years of experience said, "My patients who have experienced parentification often describe being alone together. They have partners, friends, even children, but they feel like nobody really knows them. And the reason is simple: they've never shown who they really are. Because who you truly are, the scared, tired person who just wanted to be cared for, has been buried so deep that you yourself may no longer know how to find it." Third consequence: the inability to enjoy one's achievements. You work hard, you achieve your goals, you build a life that objectively is successful, but it never feels like enough. No matter how much you achieve, it always seems like you could be doing more, being more. There's always a voice whispering that you don't deserve to rest yet. This isn't imposter syndrome. It's something deeper. It's the core belief that your worth is contingent on your usefulness, so you can never stop proving your worth. You can never simply be. A researcher in the field of positive psychology discovered that people with a history of parentification have above-average levels of professional achievement, but significantly lower levels of personal satisfaction. They achieve more and enjoy less, because each achievement doesn't bring relief. It only brings the next goal that needs to be reached. Fourth consequence: relationships that repeat old patterns. Here's the most painful part. You probably swore you would never repeat your family's patterns, that you would be different, that you would choose differently. But somehow you find yourself in the same roles, taking care of emotionally immature partners, attracting people who need saving, or conversely, pushing away anyone who genuinely tries to take care of you. A psychoanalyst specializing in relational trauma explains, "We don't choose what is familiar because it's good. We choose it because it's known. The brain interprets familiar as safe, even when familiar means dysfunctional." You become the parent of your partner, or your friends, sometimes even your own parents, perpetuating a cycle that should have ended decades ago. And what happens when their own children are born? The fear of repeating the patterns is paralyzing. Fifth consequence: the body keeps score. This quote is from psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk, author of one of the most comprehensive studies on trauma. What he discovered is this: even when your mind rationally understands that you are safe now, your body still carries the old programming. Chronic tension in the shoulders, frequent headaches, digestive problems, insomnia, compromised immune system. It's not a coincidence, it's somatization. Your body is expressing what your mind has been unable to process. Chronic childhood stress literally rewires your nervous system, and this rewired system has physical consequences decades later. Sixth consequence: the late existential crisis. There's something peculiar that usually happens between the ages of 35 and 45. That's when the structure you built so carefully begins to crack. You wake up one day and realize, I've built my whole life based on what I thought I should be. But who am I really? It's terrifying, because the answer isn't there. The real self was sacrificed on the altar of survival so long ago that perhaps it no longer exists. Or it does exist, but it's so buried under layers of adaptation that you don't know how to reach it. An existential therapist describes this as the crisis of authenticity, when you finally have the resources, security, and space to be yourself, but you have no idea who that you is. And this is where many people fall apart. Divorces, radical career changes, spiritual crises, not because they're having a breakdown, but because they're finally trying to find that child who was never allowed to simply exist. Chapter 4: Paths to Healing and Remeaning. Unlearning strength and learning to be. Now we come to the part that is both the most important and the most difficult. How do you heal something that was fundamental to your survival? How do you unlearn patterns that have kept you alive? Because here's the dilemma. Those coping strategies you developed, they worked, they protected you, they helped you survive. The problem is that survival and life are not the same thing, and what saved you as a child is now imprisoning you. So let's talk about paths, not magic solutions, because those don't exist, but about real possibilities for resignification. First step, acknowledge without romanticizing. There is a tendency, especially on social media, to romanticize trauma. I went through that and look how strong I am. My difficulties have made me who I am. I am grateful for my difficult childhood. Be careful with that narrative. Because she does something dangerous. She transforms something that should never have happened into something worthwhile. It wasn't worth it. You didn't have to be strong so early. You didn't have to carry that weight. And the fact that you survived doesn't mean it was right that you had to survive. A therapist specializing in trauma said, acknowledging is not about being grateful. It's about naming. It's about saying, this happened, it shouldn't have happened, and it affected me in specific ways. No drama, no playing the victim, but also no glorification. The plain truth, you were a child who had to grow up too fast, and that had consequences. Recognizing this is not weakness. It's the first step towards freedom. Second path, learning the language of your emotions. Remember when we talked about how you learn to suppress, ignore, and compartmentalize your emotions? Now you need to unlearn that. And no, it's not easy, because you've spent decades becoming an expert at not feeling. But here's the thing, unprocessed emotions don't disappear. They just find other ways to express themselves, usually through the body, or through disproportionate outbursts, or through a constant feeling of numbness. A neuroscientist who studies emotional regulation explains, emotions are data. They are information from your body about what you need. When you chronically suppress them, you lose access to your internal navigation system. So how do you reconnect with that? First, you need to create space. Literally, moments of the day where you're not producing, not solving problems, not being useful. You're just existing. This is going to be uncomfortable. Because when you stop, the emotions you were running from finally catch up with you. Let them catch up. Second, you need to learn to name what you feel. It seems simple, but for someone who has spent their entire life dissociating, saying I am sad or I am angry can be revolutionary. There's a therapeutic exercise called a body scan, where you literally scan your body looking for sensations, tension in the chest, tightness in the throat, weight on the shoulders. These sensations are your emotions trying to communicate with you. You just need to learn to listen. Third path, to reparent oneself. This is probably the most transformative concept in trauma therapy. Reparenting doesn't mean blaming your parents or pretending your childhood was different. It means learning to give yourself what you haven't received. Validation, protection, permission to be imperfect, permission to rest, permission to need. An IFS, internal family systems therapist, explains it this way. Inside you, there's still that scared child who had to be too strong, and she's waiting for someone to finally say, you don't have to carry everything alone anymore. I'll take care of you now. And the I that will say this is you, the adult you know. This may sound strange, almost mystical, but it is profoundly practical. It's about you consciously deciding to act differently. When that inner voice says you can't rest yet, you respond, yes, I can, and I will. When you feel guilty about saying no, you respond, saying no doesn't make me bad, it makes me honest. It's a constant internal dialogue, rewriting the rules you've internalized. Fourth option, therapy. But the right kind. Not all therapies work for developmental trauma. So find a good therapist who specializes in this area of treatment, research the best approaches for this type of trauma, and contact a professional you trust. Don't fall for what anyone tries to sell you on the internet. We know that nowadays, the internet is full of people trying to sell all sorts of things. So look for a qualified professional. And perhaps most importantly, find a therapist who understands that your strength isn't the problem, The problem is that you've never been allowed to be anything other than strong. Fifth path, corrective relationships. You can't heal something on your own that was caused by relationships. You need different relational experiences, people who don't expect you to be strong, who allow you to falter, who stay when you show your ugly sides. But here's the challenge. These people are probably already in your life. You're the one who won't let them in. Because real intimacy, the vulnerability of being seen when things aren't going well, triggers all your internal alarms. A couples therapist observes, the work isn't about finding the perfect person, it's about learning to receive love imperfectly. This means communicating your needs, even when it seems impossible. It means accepting help even when every fiber of your being wants to refuse. It means crying in front of someone and seeing that they don't abandon you. Each of these small experiences reprograms your nervous system. It shows your primitive brain, look, I can be vulnerable and still be safe. Sixth path, to give new meaning to your narrative. You have a story about yourself, a story you tell yourself about who you are. It's probably something like, I am strong, I am independent, I don't need anyone. Or perhaps, I am the one who takes care of things. That's what I do. And this story, it needs to be rewritten, not erased, rewritten. The difference is subtle but crucial. You don't deny that you had to be strong, but you add a nuance. I was strong because I had no choice, but now I do, and I'm choosing to be more than just strong. The most resilient people are not those who deny their trauma. They are those who can tell their story in a way that includes both pain and growth, without romanticizing either. Many call this a complex redemptive narrative, where you acknowledge that bad things happened, had a real impact, and you're doing something about it. Not because it was worth it, but because it's what you have. Seventh path, allowing oneself to grieve. This is perhaps the most painful thing. At some point, you're going to need to grieve for the childhood you never had, for the child you should have been allowed to be, for the games you didn't play because you were busy being an adult, for the care you didn't receive, for the lightheartedness that should have been yours. This grief has no deadline, it has no specific format, but it is necessary, because you can't heal from something you're still pretending didn't happen. Mourning a lost childhood is complicated, because there is no body. There is no funeral, there is no social ritual. You are mourning something that should have existed but didn't. So you create your own rituals. Write letters to the child you once were. Do things that child would have enjoyed doing. Give yourself the permission that no one gave you back then. Yes, this might seem silly, even childish, but perhaps that's precisely the point. There's a quote from the poet Rainer Maria Rilke that resonates deeply here. Perhaps all terrible things are, at their core, helpless things that need our help. The parts of you that had to be too strong, too fast, too grown up, they are not your enemies. They are the helpless parts of you that did the best they could with what they had. And now finally you can help them, not suppressing, not shaming, but integrating, allowing them to exist without needing to control everything. But there's something that almost no one talks about regarding this whole process. Something that only reveals itself when you are deeply immersed in the work of rebuilding yourself. Here's the thing. The more you heal, the stranger you might seem to others, because the people around you have become accustomed to the version of you that always said yes. That was always available. That was always strong. And when you start setting boundaries, prioritizing your needs, saying I can't without extensively justifying yourself, some people will support you, but others, they'll accuse you of being selfish, changed, distant. And here's the question no one prepares you to face. Some of your relationships won't survive your healing, because they were built on your willingness to sacrifice. And when you stop doing that, the foundation crumbles. True healing sometimes feels like loss, because you're losing the version of yourself that everyone loved, the one who said yes to everything. And some will prefer that version to the real you. This is not tragic, it's liberating. Why do relationships last? They're the ones that want all of you, not just something useful. It's the people who celebrate when you finally learn to rest, not those who punish you for it. So here we are, at the end of a conversation about something that, for many of you, has never been openly discussed. On the silent weight of having been too strong too fast, I wanted to tell you that there's a simple solution, a super easy 5-step technique, a life hack that solves everything. But it doesn't have it. What we have is this: recognition, compassion, time, and the daily choice to practice something that was never allowed, to be kind to yourself. Let me tell you something you probably needed to hear a long time ago. You didn't have to be so strong. You didn't have to carry that alone. And the fact that you succeeded doesn't mean it should have been necessary. You were just a child. And you deserved to be just that, a child. But what matters most now is that you're still here. You survived. And survival no longer needs to be your only way of existing. You can choose something else besides that. This change won't be linear. There will be days when you revert to old patterns. Days when you find yourself taking on responsibilities that aren't yours. Days when you can't relax, can't ask for help, can't be vulnerable. All good. Healing is not perfection. It's direction. And every time you recognize the pattern, every time you choose differently, even if only for 5 minutes, you are rewriting decades of programming. You are teaching your nervous system that safety is possible, that you can be loved without being useful, that you can occupy space without having to justify your existence. This is revolutionary. Especially for someone who spent their entire life believing they only deserved to be here if they were solving everyone else's problems. So, if you've made it this far, if you recognized your story in this video, first, you are not alone. There are millions of people carrying this same invisible weight. Second, seek help, therapy, community. Not because you are broken, but because you deserve support in the process of becoming whole. And third, be patient with yourself. You've spent decades building these defenses. They're not going to crumble overnight, and that's okay. Because for the first time in your life, you're not racing against time. You're not in survival mode. You're simply living and learning what it means to live, not despite your history, but through it. Integrating, not escaping. Reconnecting with that child that still lives inside you and finally saying, I see you, I hear you, and you don't have to be strong alone anymore. I'm going to take care of you now. Thank you for staying until the end, for paying attention to something as important as this. If you want to continue exploring topics about human development, psychology, and philosophy, click on the video that will appear on the screen. In each video on the channel, I try to address a different theme. Some videos focus more on critical thinking, philosophy, and other topics. Not all videos on the channel focus on something as sensitive as the topic of this video you're watching now, but I'm sure the content can bring you good food for thought. Thank you again for your attention. Until the next video.